Many believe that the tensions between Europe and the United States began after the ending of World War I. The most popular view among experts is that it began after the conclusion of World War II, although this fact is not a proven fact. The Cold War was basically threats from the Soviet Union directed at the United States or the United States towards the Soviet Union. It was a series of threats concerning nuclear warfare. These threats continued on for a period over 40 years. During the most intense periods of the Cold War, the leader of the United States was Ronald Reagan, and of the Soviet Union, the leader was Mikhail Gorbachev. Gorbachev on the left and Reagan on the right. Many U.S. presidents put an effort to trying to stop nuclear threats, but Ronald Reagan showed the most leadership. Reagan put his great leadership skills to work when meeting with the Soviet Union leaders. Not only did he stop the Cold War, he also helped change the course of our country. Without him, who knows where our country would be now, or even if we even would exist. Reagan was determined to stop this crisis that had been enduring for nearly 40 years. He devised a series of tactics to convince Gorbachev to stop the threats towards one another's countries. In order to strengthen relations with the Soviets, Reagan proposed a plan that would send funds to the Soviets to build a factory that would build engines for trucks. They believed that this would be positively viewed by their enemies. This plan was passed by the United States government and was put into action. A significant amount of money was sent over. Russian workers began the construction. They promised the United States officials a complete inspection to be done a year later, once the factory was being put to work. The factory construction was completed. A couple months later, the U.S. officials arrived. A report was sent back to Reagan explaining how the factory was not used to build engines for normal trucks, but instead during the inspection they had discovered that they were building engines for military vehicles. This came as a shock to Reagan. He thought the war had been dying down, but instead signs led him to believe that conflict was about to intensify. He knew he had to do something and do something fast. Eventually, word got out that the Soviets were intensifying their intentions for war. Citizens of the United States became restless. They began to worry about our military strength and size compared to the Soviets. President Reagan immediately announced to the public that he was working extremely hard to increase the size and power of the military while spending the least possible money he could. This act of leadership calmed down many restless U.S. citizens. Soon after Reagan had just calmed down his people who had been captured and forced to work in Russian, Soviet, Siberian camps began to speak out. They explained how cruel and ruthless the Soviets were. They told the horrific things they went through. This caused another great uproar among the people. People became even more restless than they were before. Reagan boldly spoke out, explaining that if the Soviets started conflict, then Reagan and his military would do anything he could to stop it. He told them that even he would stand up and fight against the Soviets if that's what it took. On Russian history to talk to Gorbachev. Reagan told Massey to encourage Gorbachev to stop sending threats of violence, showing him what possible outcomes could happen. For example, potentially a nuclear war. This act showed Reagan's leadership to think outside of the box to help protect the people of his country. Reagan, showing his leadership skills, devised a plan to perform a speech at the Berlin Wall. His speech was directed towards all enemy nations, asking them to think about what they're doing. He spoke out, proclaiming how pointless this conflict was. He spoke at Gorbachev directly, saying he should change his ways, asking him to rethink his future plans, and asking them not to start a worldwide nuclear war. Reagan scheduled a meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev and many other Russian leaders. He sat down and explained to them how useless this whole Cold War was. He explained how if they were willing, the threats could be ended and both sides could be peaceful. The tearing down of the Berlin Wall began the end of the Cold War. Communist leader after communist leader stepped down. Communist countries began declaring themselves independent. The first was Germany in the tearing down of the Berlin Wall. Hungary proclaimed Eventually, Ukraine proclaimed themselves independent as well. Gorbachev still wanted to be their absolute leader of the Soviet Union. He proposed a treaty by the name of the Union Treaty, which gave greater power to each small country in the Soviet Empire, but yet he would still be the leader of them all. Finally, in 1991, Russia, Ukraine, and Byeloruss proclaimed their independence, leaving Gorbachev as a leader with no one to lead. The Cold War had officially ended, all thanks to Reagan. Ronald Reagan has left a great legacy. He will always be remembered as the president who ended the Cold War, the one who stood up for the protection of his citizens, whom he truly loved. It wasn't only the acts of courage he did for his country, it was the way he carried himself. A true American, loving, caring, and honest. This is why America loved him so much. As a result of the marvelous deeds of Ronald Reagan, he has been honored by way of many memorials. He has many libraries, roads, schools, and statues, all made in his name. But certainly the most important is the Reagan Presidential Library, with his burial out in front. Located in Simi Valley, California, this is a great memorial built to honor Ronald Reagan. This truly shows how much he meant as a leader to the United States of America. This picture shows Ronald's wife, Nancy, mourning at the burial site of her husband. He will always be remembered as an outstanding president, a president who stood up for his people under any circumstances, a president who protected his country from nuclear warfare, the one, the only, Ronald Reagan.